It'll make sure that freight can move faster, autos can move faster, but certainly the bus mode would be able to move faster. And I think that's an important note that we're bringing to the table. If we're going to go BRT, and we don't know that yet, we ought to make sure that there's a lot of separate right-of-way, because that's where the benefits you get from land use and operational savings. We know from New Start's funding, our federal partners, they're requiring about 50% separated right-of-way. So there's some thresholds that we need to make. The next one is on service enhancements. So again, this is making sure we connect the dots. There are a lot of essential towns in here. There's not a great grid, as you know, in Southwest, and that's another reason to do high-capacity transit. The roadways are the roadways, and it's hard to expand those dramatically. So make sure we're doing a good job of connecting the dots with service enhancement. And I think everybody's saying, let's do that sooner than later. We can do some of those movements, not wait to the high-capacity alternative that's 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. We can start looking at some of those improvements, connecting those dots now, making sure we connect better in the west alignment. So that's what the region's asking us to do. Finally, there's been a lot of public involvement, and tonight there's another public involvement, and Metro does a lot of public involvement. We've been out there with them, making sure that we're representing the agency in a way that represents the interest here of operational savings and making sure we're doing the right thing. So where are we? This last page kind of gives you where we are. There's an adoption of how far should we go? Should we look at Tigard and Tualatin? We know the different modes. So over the next year, we'll be refining exactly, do we go up to PCC of Sylvania? Do we, if we have a light rail alignment, do we have a tunnel that serves OHSU? Are we on NATO, or are we Barber in downtown? So there's a lot of options and alignment options from Tualatin to Tigard, which would be on Hall Boulevard or 72nd Avenue. So there's a lot of those that need to get sorted out. We'll be doing that work over the next year, narrowing down to a handful of promising alternatives that we can take into the next phase, which is a draft environmental impact statement, which is one of the first phases that you need to go through if you're going to qualify for federal funding. A lot of information in a short time. I think the key message is the region is saying we ought to invest in high-capacity transit in the Southwest Corridor. We think that's a good thing. We have all of our partners ready to vote for that, saying, yeah, we should move forward with this. And the first vote is really happening on July 22nd, and we'll be there, hopefully voting yes to move these things forward. So wanted to make you aware of that. You'll be getting more updates on this as we move forward. Are there any questions?
There may be. Do we have some questions yet? Yeah. Director Stovall, go first.
Oh, no,
go ahead. Desmond?
I'll take his.
All right.
So this may be a little broader question than just for you, Dave, but in regards to, as I look at, I don't know, the slides aren't numbered, but
Yep.
the slide that kind of shows the
Sure.
different, all the cities and then the circles and the lines between the cities and the potential, I know this hasn't been voted on. I know the decision hasn't been made to go with the BRT. I know we're looking at BRT in other parts of the region, potentially the Powell Division corridor from downtown out to the East Metro. My question goes along the lines of the appearance of what we're looking at here for high-capacity transit in kind of this scale looks pretty extensive in comparison to what we've done historically and what we've talked about historically.
Sure.
And my first thought goes to overall cost.
Sure.
I mean, when I'm looking at this, it appears that we're going to have a fair number of high-capacity transit lines or BRT within the Southwest Corridor, which it sounds exciting because ultimately, you're right. Where we really gain is having the 50 to 100% right of way for the travel of these buses. As far as cost goes, when we're looking at it this extensively, what type of cost differences are we going to see in regards to the construction of the right of ways and the construction of the bus landings or whatever that looks like? I know there's some New Start funding and things like that we can receive. And I'm assuming that once we go to operations, we actually, may see some savings. But if we're going to be investing or looking at investing something of this magnitude in the Southwest Corridor, how does that affect the rest of the region when we're also looking at some north-south connections that need to be looked at and other parts of the region? Primarily, one of the reports that we did was the East Metro Connections Plan, which identified north-south connectors in regards to ensuring that people can move in that regard. So I know this is a long question, but essentially, if we're looking at potentially investing this kind of dollars in the Southwest Corridor, how does that affect potential capital projects in the rest of the region? And then operationally, how do we expand some of the services that we need to make sure that other folks are being taken care of? You have a smile on your face, so I'm assuming that the question is a little more expansive than what you expected.
Board Member Stovall, there are about 4 questions in there, but I think I probably went over this pretty quickly. So, the high-capacity transit line would be one route that would go from downtown Portland through Tigard down to Tualatin. So that's where we would look in investing in the capital improvements. The image that was not on the numbered pages, but the one that says service enhancements, those would be local service that would tie into those different essential centers. And so it would be looking at reprioritizing some of the routes that are out there, maybe adding some additional service. But it's looking at doing a better job, perhaps looking at reorienting in a circumferential route some bus routes. So it's not maybe a significant increase in service hours in this corridor, but it's looking at a different way of doing it in preparation for that one line or that series of lines that go into downtown Portland to Tigard and to Tualatin. So maybe that was the first thing that I can clear up. So this is looking at how do we reorient to do a better job of serving some of these centers that are out there in the Southwest Corridor. And high-capacity transit is the one major line that goes from Portland down to Tigard. So from a cost standpoint, there's both capital and operating cost. The cost of light rail will vary depending on if we choose a tunnel or how much, different alignments that we have, how much walls we put in here. But essentially we think to about Tigard, it's about $1.7 billion. So in comparison, we don't know exactly how we're going to design the bus rapid transit. We would say that we would calculate these as order of magnitude cost, a range of cost. So somewhere for that, about $680 to $700 million for BRT to Tigard. Obviously, it gets more expensive as you extend down to Tualatin, but there is a cost differential between that. If you look at the savings, or you look at the operating dollars, so how much do we spend on an annual basis, it's forecasted. And remember, this is 2035. There's lots of vagaries. There's lots of things that are going to change. But the numbers that we were seeing, it's about $4.9 million a year to operate that light rail line to Tigard, comparison to about 6.3 for the BRT. And why does BRT cost more? Well, light rail vehicle holds a lot more passengers, so you don't have to have the same frequency. And a lot of the cost of the operation of the vehicle hours is the operator. So you have more vehicles required for a bus rapid transit, therefore the operating costs go up. So there's going to be a comparison and a push-pull. It's going to cost more to construct light rail, probably less to operate light rail in comparison to a BRT alternative. Did that answer your questions?
It did, because, as I was looking at this information, I was primarily...
Time.
Yes, Mr. President.
Hello, Dr. Bethel?
Dr. Bethel, this is Bruce Warner. The board is in session, and we're receiving a report on the Southwest Corridor study, a little update right at the moment, and the staff is answering some questions from Director Stovall. So listen in, and we'll get to your issues in a bit also.
Thank you.
All right.
So yes, when as we begin to look at kind of the BRT or HCT high capacity transit map, I had a little bit of confusion as to the extensiveness of what we would be looking at doing the build out for. Because now that you mentioned it, that the one with all the city names and the lines isn't a representation of a future build out of BRT or high capacity transit, and it's primarily this map here that's what we're talking about. But you did touch on an interesting perspective and aspect in regards to the operational cost differences. I wouldn't have thought that they would be that significant. It sounds like they're about 50% higher per year for bus rapid transit over light rail, but clearly there are reasons why.
It's just really there's more. You can't get as many people on a bus as a light rail vehicle. Therefore, to meet the demand, you need more buses, and as a result, more buses, more drivers, more cost.
Just, if I might just add a couple notes. One is on the sort of regional prioritization question. Frankly, we've had that conversation within the region since about 1982 about which, and actually we've done as a region a pretty good job of rotating around corridor to corridor, so making sure east and west all sort of get their fair share. And that's really the study that led to this, was the Metro study that established Southwest Corridor as the next high priority together with the PAL division BRT. So remember that the funding of these projects historically have been about 5% TriMet contributions. So they really are regional decisions and regional contributions where the partners have to come together and decide, A, it's worth it, and B, that this is indeed their priority at this point in time. So that's very much a work in progress.
Director Esmond, you had a question?
Yeah, Dan, I'm not sure, maybe I should have read more of my homework, and I've gotten 5.8 pounds of binders, and
That's all?
You've only got half?
well, I'm older than you. One of the things I'm involved in is how this would interface with there's a map, overlay map of industrial lands in the metro area. There's a survey in this. I wonder quickly, and I can take this offline, and how much that plays into your planning. Jobs, employment, basically, you know. I see a lot of younger people here, younger than I, and they're gonna have to work.
26% of the region's employment is in this corridor.
Okay.
So I think the service enhancements, and tying those service enhancements into some of the industrial areas like in Tualatin that are growing, making sure that we have connections along Tualatin-Sherwood Road that tie into a high-capacity transit line that gets you from either west or downtown Portland. So we make sure we have that mobility, and that means trying to tie into both employment areas and residential areas. So the surface enhancements are meant to do that.
Right.
A high-capacity transit is the backbone of that to make sure it's fast to get there from other locations.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions on this side of the table? Okay, I guess I just had one. I'm looking at this map where you've actually looking at the options you're gonna study. So this is something the steering committee is actually blessed and as narrowing of the alternatives?
Yes, so
Okay.
they have narrowed, so some of the things that they are not studying, so they're not studying streetcar alignments anymore. They're not studying high-capacity transit between Tigard and Sherwood. Local service will continue between those two, but the disruptions we're seeing too much. We're not serving substantial new service on I-5 because it really doesn't address the land use places. So it starts with land use, it's connecting the dots with local service and high-capacity transit. So they've made some recommendations, but this is the next major step as that will go into refining the alternatives that are suggested or recommended to the steering committee on July 22nd.
Perfect, okay. All right. Seeing no other questions, did you have anything else?
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it. Back to you.
So, Brett, next, if I could ask Harry Supporter to come up, we wanted to review with you the security statistics, if you will, the crime statistics for the last couple of years, and actually where we're going with all of that. So Harry's put together a little presentation that I think we wanted to go through very quickly.
Good morning,
Good
President
morning.
Warner and board members. I think you do have yes, that's it. And what I'd like to do this morning is give you an overview of the crime statistics. Principally, the annual report focuses on the MAX system, and then give you a little bit of some information about how we improve security on the system to address the issues that we identified, and then the next steps beyond that. So if you go to the next page, you'll see that for the first quarter of 2013, that's not really the annual report, but I did want to highlight that to show that we are 11% down on reported crimes as compared to the first quarter of 2012. If you look through the page, you can see that there was a steady rise, and although there was a modest increase in service, there wasn't really a significant jump in reported crimes between 2010 and 2011. But then you see that there was a significant rise in 2012, and jumped from 507 to 574 reported crimes. But also keep in mind that the target was not necessarily the person to cause harm, but rather the target was of their belongings. So if you go to the next page, you'll see a graph. And you can see that the crimes against customers, there was a spike, and that's that top line. There was a spike in the March to June timeframe. And you can also see that there was then a steady rise of auto theft beginning in July through October. So obviously the next question that needs to be asked is what led to this increase? So if you go to the next page, you can see that the primary target was electronics. And this is not something that's unique to TriMet. This was actually something that was occurring nationally with other transit systems, but also within cities. And Portland is really no different. And most of those crimes, we had 42 robberies on the MAX system. That's pretty significant. And most of those occurred in that first 6 months. So we developed a strategy to deal with this issue, and you'll see that there was a significant drop after those first 6 months. The second issue was bicycle thefts. And these were largely due to individuals not securing their bicycles appropriately or not being attentive to the bicycle itself. And then lastly, what we call objects left behind. This is something that's left on board, person forgets it, and then reports it as not showing up at TriMet because they call into Lost and Found, and they say, no, we don't have it, and because of that, it's reported as a theft. So those were really go ahead.
Harry, if you could please explain the difference between a robbery and a theft.
Oh, sure. A robbery is when I confront you and I say, I want what you have in your hand, and I take it away from you, whereas the theft is that I reach into your backpack or your bag and I lift it out from your bag. So I'm not...
Confrontation versus non-confrontation.
Correct. That's the difference. And so we saw a lot of confrontational taking of belongings, and that was quite alarming, and we needed to address this. So if you go to the next page, you'll see that the auto thefts nearly increased. There was nearly an increase of 56%, and the primary target were older Hondas and Toyotas. That's because they're very, very easy to steal. And that's what we saw as the rise. And then if you go to the next page, and I'll get to some of the strategies in just a minute. There were really 4 principal park and ride stations where the auto thefts were occurring, and those are the Gresham City Hall, Gateway, Park Rose, and Sunset. And you can see that when you compare it to the 2011 numbers to the 2012 numbers, there was a significant increase, particularly at Gateway. So what were the strategies? And that's on your next page. It was really fourfold. To address the rise in criminal activity, first we increased presence on the system, particularly at the transit centers to thwart the auto thefts. That was one activity. We used a combination of police officers and security forces, as well as the TriMet supervisors. We increased presence on the trains themselves, and that was to address the theft issue and the robberies. We also created a special investigation team, and this team was actually it was pretty significant because they were credited with apprehending a group of individuals that were targeting our customers and stealing this. Once we put the team together, identified the individuals, and made several arrests, there was an enormous drop-off in the number of robberies. We still continued to see thefts, but not nearly to the degree that we saw it before. The other tactic was to better educate the public. How to secure their bicycle better, how to secure their automobile, not leave valuables in plain view, and also how to better secure your electronics. It's amazing when you ride the train or the bus and you'll see individuals literally holding the device out for someone to walk by and just snatch it out of your hand. And those were the robberies that we were seeing. We also use something called decoy cars, and it's exactly what it is. It's set up as a sting to draw the thief in, and then we make the arrest. So we use those in several locations, and that was somewhat successful. There was a very large arrest that was made in Beaverton, and this individual was credited for not only stealing cars at our transit centers, but also on city streets as well. So that's the brief overview, and I think it's important to remember that crime on the system is low, that the investigations and really the analysis helps to develop the strategies to combat criminal activity. And also key to this is presence on the system, and we make every effort to increase that presence to the extent possible. So what are the next steps? Obviously, we'll continue to monitor the data. We'll continue to build upon our partnerships with other law enforcement agencies and then improve on our strategies. And as I said before, we're already seeing 11% drop in the crime rate. So I fully expect continued improvement in that particular area. So I don't know if you have any specific questions.
I have just one question. I know a couple of years ago there were assaults on the trains. Did anything like that happen? Or is that lower? Is that part of some of the information that you just gave us? Or?
If you look at the slide that shows the graph, that does include what we call aggravated assaults as well. But those numbers are very, very low. They're in the handfuls. So it's fortunate that the primary target is not harming customers, but rather trying to steal their belongings.
And do we have in any one particular area where the crime rate is higher than others?
Yes, we see two areas. One is the Lloyd and downtown area, and so we continue to concentrate in that area, and also the East County area.
Thank you.
So we deploy our resources as appropriately, recognizing that we need to look at those areas, but also all the other areas as well, so that we don't see a spike in the other areas.
And my last question.
Please, yes.
Yeah. So what are the hours that our safety officers are actually working? Is it 24? Is it 12? Is it from what time to what time?
I'm reluctant to give you our deployment strategy.
I understand. Okay.
I would be happy to discuss it offline.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
Quick question. So when you say it's down 11%, that's just last year's, because if the spike was January to June, let's say, or springtime, and then it was really those last 6 months, given these strategies that helped to lower it to 11% for 2012?
Yes.
So that's pretty encouraging in a short period of time.
Well, to give you an example, there were approximately 30 or so electronic thefts in the first half of 2011. Okay, or 2012, I'm sorry. But now in 2013, in the first quarter, we've only seen 16. So, I mean, there's been a very dramatic drop.
Good report. Thank you.
Questions down here?
Just a quick question.
Please.
In regards to we have the slide that shows us the highest auto theft locations, which, you highlighted the 4: Gresham City Hall, Gateway, Transit Center, Park Rose, and Sunset. As we look at that, we've got 8 in Gresham, 23 at Gateway, 9 at Park Rose, and 5 at Sunset. But clearly we would say that Gateway is a confluence of so many different transit lines and systems that there's a significant increase of traffic that flows through Gateway, correct?
Absolutely.
So so essentially when we see 23 there, it's not so much that there's that much more crime that's going on in the area by way of just as a percentage, but there's that much crime going on because there's just a significant, massive amount of people that actually travel through that center of transit.
That's correct. That's the main hub of TriMet. You see a number of lines going through there, rail lines and bus lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that was it. Just a quick clarification.
Dr. Bethel, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time.
Okay. I guess I just
No
have
report.
Good. Thank you for the report, Harry. I guess the question I have is, again, about people's perception of safety. And do we have any information really that what drives people's perception of safety? What are the issues that are most important to them? I mean, I look at our system, I look at the cameras we have up. If there's any place you don't want to commit a crime, it's on one of our trains, buses, or at our transit stations, or in most all of our park and rides, because they're monitored.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, what are the things that we can do, or what are the areas that we need to talk about to deal with some of the perception issues? Because I look at the numbers, and the numbers are low, but still there's perceptions out there and concerns by people. So what are those concerns, or what are those issues that we really need to focus on to help them?
One issue is there are times when they see behavior that is inappropriate on the bus or the train, and it just makes them feel uncomfortable. So we try to increase the presence on the system to give people a sense of security. It's difficult to be everywhere all the time. So that's why we're trying to come up with new tactics to address these issues. One of those tactics is we've been using plainclothes missions in the past, but we've been in contact with other transit agencies to see how they use plainclothes, and we've changed our tactic as to how we deploy those and use them. And I think we're beginning to see a positive change in that behavior. It's not I'm going to get you. That's not what we're trying to do. But what we do want to do is let people know that we are vigilant, and we're watching, and we will take the appropriate measures to help ensure there's security and safety.
Okay. Good. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
So Harry, stick around for just a moment in case there's some other questions. I did want to just note that we do have some safety missions underway today on the West Line, where we particularly patrol for unsafe crossings or trespassers within the right-of-way. This is something that we particularly want to step up during the summer season and make sure particularly young people who sometimes might feel more invulnerable than the rest of us might take some chances that they otherwise shouldn't be. And to that end, that is actually one of the reasons for this insert that was in community newspapers recently. We just try to get a little attention to that notion and make sure that both families in particular are dealing with some of these issues at home. And I also note that these West safety operations are in conjunction with the local police departments, and it's very great amount of coordination on that. And we will actually see other days where that will occur during the summer season here. And so I appreciate Harry's staff in doing that. Also wanted to note that our Be Seen, Be Safe campaign was recently the recipient of a merit award from the American Public Transit Association. So I actually wanted to hold this up and deliver it to Harry, but Harry gets some credit for this, but so does our marketing department, in particular Pam Wilson, who has been putting these sorts of ads together with the events like you see when we often have the start of the dark time, when the calendar changes and the clocks change, and we always have a big event associated with Be Seen, Be Safe, and including handing out lights and other things to some of our customers. So I would note that this is also a multi-agency effort where we actually joined with PBOT, with this ODOT, with Operation Lifesaver, which looks at that sort of from the heavy rail standpoint, all come together to sort of coordinate these safety campaigns and efforts. And so part of our effort also includes slides at theaters during the summer season to reinforce these safety messages, and we've found that's a very effective way to reach our target audience of particularly young people. So just wanted to note that. I think some great efforts overall. Obviously, we know we can always do better and more, and that's exactly what we're into. So I did just want to note that our safety efforts are continuing. So my thanks to Harry, Drew Blevins, Pam Wilson for their work on all of that effort. I did want to move, unless there are questions.
Real quick question. Where do you find this?
These went in all the community newspapers, particularly on the west side, I think was the emphasis.
And we'll also hand these out at community events and other locations.
I have a quick follow-up question just to the safety component. specifically on the MAX trains and on the MAX stops where we have crossings. Over the last, I would probably say last year, 2 years, we've started to install the railings that actually point you in the direction of an oncoming train. How pervasive is that throughout, or extensive is that throughout our system these days?
Throughout our
The
system?
MAX system, yeah.
We continue to install those at locations where we currently do not have them. And so what comes to mind in particular is there's a particular project on the west side in the about 158th, and where these are not currently in place, but we will place them there because they're making a number of improvements, and that's going to be one of the improvements. We're always looking at opportunities to improve pedestrian safety. We're doing that on the east side as well as the west side.
Well, I've got to say that I live right next to a MAX track, and when I first saw those go in, I was kind of annoyed because I was thinking it was hindering my progress as I went jogging or cycling or whatever.
And it's working.
But clearly,
And it was.
It clearly was hindering my progress. I don't jog anymore because of that. And other reasons. But clearly it does work. And at one point in time I was getting ready to walk across the track and I had my earphones in and I turned because of the railing and clearly the train was coming and I wasn't paying attention. So they are certainly having the desired effect. So we certainly want to, continue to improve and enhance our safety utilizing.
Now you'll be our poster child. So.
Yes, it worked out. Worked out very, very well. But clearly we want to continue to enhance our safety utilizing those types of tools.
Precisely. Okay, thank you. A quick ridership report. For the first quarter, or spring quarter, we actually carried 25 million rides on TriMet. That was a bit of a drop from the same quarter last year, but you might remember that the same quarter last year also had gas at an extremely high level compared to where it was this year, and we do have that sort of trade-off of comparison of travel types that occurs. So overall, weekly ridership was down about 4.6%, and again, that was higher on MAX than on bus. And the main reason for that higher was the reduction or the elimination of free rail zone that occurred starting in September. So the first sort of comparison with free rail zone eliminated will be the September statistics. I wanted Steve Callis of our analysis group to actually describe a little bit about what we know about the free rail zone ridership, because we've had a number of questions from board members and others about that over a period of time. So Steve?
Okay. First of all, in your packet, I think you see some graphs. I thought we'd go over a little bit of a historical ridership. I don't know if you've seen, I've been at TriMet for 16 years collecting ridership information. So I've got graphs kind of going back to 1999 just to show some historical growth trends. And the first one is a kind of a weekly system-wide ridership. So this is weekly, daily, average weekday ridership plus Saturday and Sunday. And you can see overall that we've had a pretty good increasing trend that's going through, and I've highlighted some significant events. You can see whenever there's a MAX line open that we see a spike in overall ridership. And then if you take a look in the spring of 2008, when gas was approaching $5 a gallon, we saw a huge increase, a large spike in ridership. And then soon after that, we all know, was the recession that came through, and there was some associated service cuts along with that are really decreased our growth in ridership. It still overall was growing a little bit, but definitely had a much smaller decline. And then you see recently how there's been a little bit of a decline in ridership, how it's been dropping. And then the next one you take a look is breaking it out by mode. So if you want to take a look at a weekday fixed ridership, you can see that bus ridership pretty much was flat throughout most of the early 2000s through 2008. Again, there was the dot-com recession, and again, too, there was, as we added new MAX lines as well, too, through there, but it was fairly growth. But you look at the large increase of when gas was it really spiked up when gas in the spring of 2008, summer when gas was 5,000, and then of course the recession was going through with associated service cuts. But you take a look at the last several months, it's actually been kind of rebounding and increasing a little bit over the last few months, which is very encouraging. The next one shows the weekly MAX light rail ridership, and you can see the overall growth. It was steady growth rate on Max all the way going through, and you see the spikes of every single new line that's opened, as well too the red, the green, the yellow, and then a little bit of a service cuts that kind of slowed the growth a little bit. But then you can take a look at the last 6 months, and you can see there's a significant drop on the trend on going through there. So that's one I want to talk about. And then lastly, just to show West how West was been steadily growing since it's been a opening. However, pretty good growth, and then just showing that it's been leveling off over the last 6-7 months. We did see large growth in West ridership. There was remember a storm, I believe it was in 2010, that attracted a lot of riders on West, kind of a winter storm, and they stayed. So that was very good. So that's what we on West. So that's kind of a background of historical ridership, just put things in perspective. I want to go on to the next on the table. Now this shows the elimination of what happened with the elimination of the free rail zone. First of all, you can see Neil just gave the ridership numbers showing that on Max, comparing this spring to spring 2012, overall the ridership is down on a weekly basis about 8%, a little bit higher on weekends, a little larger increase of decline on weekends. So that's the top showing the decline. So you can see overall on average weekdays we lost about 8,500 boarding rides a day. But down below, the next chart shows the ridership within the free rail zone. And so our estimate of previous, in spring of 2012, of when we actually had the free rail zone in place, that on an average weekday there were over 27,000 rides within the free rail zone. So these are traveling just within the free rail zone, and about a little bit lower on weekends, but similar. And then comparison of spring 2013, so this would be 6 months after the elimination of the free rail zone, that you can see that we've dropped about 33% of the ridership within the free rail zone. So on weekdays, a decline of over 9,000, similar on Saturday, and of course a little bit less on Sunday. But what's significant about this is that this is pretty much explains almost all the ridership loss that we've seen on Max. So it really does show that without the elimination of the free rail zone, our ridership on Max would be flat, would be similar to what we've seen in the past. So all that 8% that we discussed about on the system monthly is primarily due to the free rail zone. So I want to point out a couple other items too, is that we've seen most of the largest decline we've seen in elimination of the free rail zone is within the Lloyd district. I think there were a lot of people that were, especially on weekdays, that were doing the commuting trips since it was free, so they were parking in the Lloyd district and riding. So we have seen a small increase of bus ridership across the Steel Bridge. So I think some of them have moved over to the closest bus route that they're taking. And then also some of the Portland streetcar as well too. We don't know the impacts, but now we have the East Side streetcar, so that could be some of the decline as well too. The convention center ridership is not down as much as other locations as well too, so perhaps there's been less of an impact, or the convention pass, it seems to be successful because ridership at the convention center seems to be holding steady, which is a good sign. And again, we're not really sure where the free rail zone trips have gone. We assume that many of them within downtown are probably just walking. But again, most of the decline we've seen is within the Lloyd district and downtown. And last thing I just want to point out too, that there really is no loss in revenue from this. These are all fareless trips that we've lost on the Max. So I think that is something else to point out.
Interesting to see over time as well, since this is so recent, just how it affects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is what we decided to wait is 6 months after the elimination, not the first 3 months looking at it. So, but yeah, we will definitely be tracking this over time.
Questions? Yes,
Sure.
Travis?
So our overall, as we did our budgets and as we looked at ridership, looking at this, we basically calculating our elasticity of demand to say how much, for every, let's say, dollar we increase our fares, we expect a certain either stable ridership or a decrease or an increase. Usually when you raise fares or rates or prices, it goes down based on elasticity of demand. Mm-hmm. And so basically I think what we're kind of looking back now and saying is that our elasticity of demand calculations were correct.
Yes.
But furthermore, essentially we've taken out the free rail zone, which we weren't receiving any fares for, but yet we're not, are we replacing any of that with additional revenue outside of just the increase in fares? If you understand what I'm asking. I mean, so we've seen a decrease in ridership based on taking out the free rail zone.
Correct.
We've seen an increase in overall revenue based on an increase in fares. But essentially, we're still running the same amount of trains, and we're not getting any additional revenue because these folks are not riding the max in that area per se. Is that correct or is that incorrect?
I think that is correct. When you look overall, and part of it is I think we're not able to divide the total revenue up into pieces that you're asking about as effectively as we might like. But what we would say is that overall fare revenue for this fiscal year is within 2% of what we had projected. So for the ability to frankly forecast that, I'd say that's pretty much spot on in terms of, and that did take into account the elasticities we were talking about and the switch in demand that we would see, we were projecting. We always projected that most of the free rail trips would simply not occur, would turn to walking trips or not occur. And I think to a large extent that's what we've see. So we're not seeing a huge shift to a paying customer base for some of those free rail trips, if perhaps that's your question. Some, and that's the bus indications that I think Steve was indicating, but it's not dramatic. I hope that answered your question. But
It did, and similar to Director Schweitzer's comment, it'll be interesting to kind of watch this over time to see how behaviors change and adjust based on the rapid change or the rapid review of the information after the change. So it'll be interesting to continue to watch the watch the data and watch the behaviors, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Other questions? Dr. Bethel, any questions?
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay, I guess the only, maybe question or observation, so first off, what I'm seeing, if I got this right, is that the bus system is a whole lot more sensitive to price of gas than the light rail.
Yes, it was. It
Yeah.
was. Yeah, we saw large increases in when we spiked for gas prices. Yeah.
So our bus system, if we get into higher gas prices, is probably gonna be the first part of the system that will feel the major impacts, and we have to adjust quickly. And then back to, I think, to Director Stovall's question, in terms of the downtown elimination of the free rail zone, one of the things I think we were hoping for was a reduction of some of the overcrowding of the light rail vehicles going through downtown during the peak hours. Have we actually been able to document any reductions in the crowding of those at this time?
Not much, because most of the peak load point on the west side, for example, is at Goose Hollow, which is outside the free rail zone. So you may see a little bit of less crowding for a short-term period when you're downtown, but overall, it's Goose Hollow is the main location. And again, leaving Lloyd Center on the east side as well too, as people get on east.
Yeah, okay.
Further east.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Board President, thank you for your patience. That concludes the General Manager's report.
Thank you. Is there any other questions of the General Manager? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to Director Schweitzer for a Finance and Audit Committee report.
Thank you, Director
You're so
Warner. Okay, so we met this morning and we actually had quite a bit that we talked about. Transfer study was the first that we looked at, talking about schedule and status. And so an analysis is underway, as most of you know and have already talked about. Staff will be meeting with Opal. I think some dates have been given out to provide an overview. And our goal is, as a board, that this be brought to the board and discussed at the next full board meeting. So we'll be looking at that more closely and hopefully closer to making some decisions. We also talked about the service restoration, which it's a good topic, fun topic to be talking about. We looked at a chart that was given to us of just bus restoration, max restoration, the specific lines, when those could occur. And we have asked staff to go back and give us some timing so we can associate some dates to this, as well as costs overall. So when we start to look at our strategic finance plan, we can start to determine, okay, if we're going to increase service and it's this much, what may we be losing out on or not, depending on the overall discussion. So 3 big topics this morning at our meeting: transfers, service restoration, and of course how those all fit into the overall strategic finance plan. Board member Prosser and I have spent quite a lot of time with staff starting a roadmap for the finance plan that we will be sharing with you shortly, and talking about what our strategy is going forward and how we can help ourselves long term. So that's all I have. Craig,
Excellent.
you want to add anything?
You covered it well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions of the 2 members of the Finance and Audit Committee? Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. The next thing on the agenda is the Committee on Accessible Transportation, the CAT report. It's Dr. Bethel is on the other end of the phone, but I will just point out for the members of the audience and for the board, you do have in front of you an update from Kathy Miller to Dr. Bethel talking about the CAT meeting highlights for June 19th, where they talked about the transit police, the election that they did elect the CAT chair. They talked about the e-fare system, the West Side Service Enhancement Plan, and the lift reservation and customer service. And I would also point out you do have the full meeting agenda and minutes from the last meeting included in your packets. So, Director Bethel, I don't know whether you want to add or go into any greater detail on that, but that's what I thought I'd do for the benefit of the folks here.
Mr. President, thank you. That will suffice for this month's report.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, then questions on that? Seeing none, let's move on then to the Transit Equity Advisory Committee. I think is this our first report?
Yes, it is.
Yes, Director Consuelo Zaragoza, please.
Yes, the committee met for its second time on June 13th, and just as a reminder, the committee consists of cross-section of representatives from the Tri-County area, from private, nonprofit, community, and business stakeholders, again, throughout the region. The group has been really a very hard-working group and is really looking at what principles to use to guide discussions and decisions that need to be made. We also had 2 presentations, one from staff regarding Title VI, and also the e-fare. So it was very informative and brought up a lot of really good questions around Title VI and what that looks like and how this committee will engage in that. And knowing that it has some very complex areas that really need to still be understood. The group is also looking at how to include a community that wants to have some kind of input. They're very concerned about making sure that there's transparency and how to engage the broader community. TriMet's the Title VI program we know requires public involvement, and the committee really wants to, at the next meeting, to really discuss what that might look like.
Good, thank you. It's nice to have this on the agenda. Keep this on the radar for all of us. Questions for the Director Zaragoza? Dr. Bethel, any questions? Nope. I guess that's no. So why don't we move on then to the last report, which is from Director Prosser about the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, which we lovingly call MPAC.
Right, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, this is actually a Metro committee formed by representatives of jurisdictions from all over the regions whose charge is to advise the Metro Council. 3 main topics we've been discussing, I think, of interest to TriMet are the climate smart communities strategy, which is in response to a state legislative direction for local jurisdictions to develop plans for how they might reduce the carbon imprint of those communities by 50% by the year 2050. That work is moving forward. Metro is looking at 3 different scenarios to see what the Portland metropolitan region might do. I think the very significant thing for TriMet is that